The glass tower trembled with invisible chaos. Min-jun Kim, 34, Seoul's youngest tech billionaire, stood frozen before the wall of dead screens in his operations center. Every monitor displayed the same mocking message: encrypted data, ransomed future. His empire, banking systems, healthcare networks, government contracts, all hostage to malicious code that had slithered through defenses worth millions. His chief security officer stammered explanations Min-jun no longer heard. The attack was sophisticated, unprecedented. 72 hours to pay or lose everything. His hands, usually steady on negotiations worth billions, trembled against the cold glass overlooking the city that trusted him. "Get everyone," he commanded quietly, "every expert in the country." They came in waves: cryptographers from universities, hackers offered immunity, international consultants charging obscene fees. Each examined the encryption, ran simulations, and delivered the same verdict: unbreakable. The algorithm used was theoretically sound, but practically impossible to decode in time. Some suggested paying. Min-jun refused. Paying meant surrender, meant admitting weakness in a world where perception was everything. 50 hours remained when his exhausted team suggested the impossible. Perhaps someone outside traditional channels could see what they couldn't. A mathematician not corrupted by conventional thinking. Min-jun, desperate enough to grasp at shadows, agreed. His assistant compiled a list of every mathematical mind in Seoul: retired professors, graduate students, even amateur enthusiasts. One name appeared that didn't belong: Jiwoo Park, 28, night janitor at Hansong Middle School. Bachelor's degree in mathematics, incomplete PhD, now cleaning classrooms for minimum wage. "Why is she on this list?" Min-jun demanded. "She solved the Hansong conjecture," his assistant replied quietly. "Posted the proof anonymously online 3 years ago. It was verified, but she never claimed credit." Min-jun stared at the photograph. A woman with tired eyes and pulled-back hair holding a mop. "Find her!" Jiwoo's hands were raw from bleach when they found her. She was scrubbing graffiti from the third-floor bathroom stall, earbuds playing a lecture on quantum encryption she'd downloaded from MIT's open courses. The classroom smelled of disinfectant and chalk dust, familiar and suffocating. 2 men in expensive suits stood in the doorway, impossibly out of place among the tiny desks and crayon drawings. They introduced themselves as representatives of Min-jun Kim, spoke of urgent matters requiring her expertise. Jiwoo's first instinct was refusal. She'd left that world behind when her father's medical debts consumed her PhD funding, when professors stopped returning emails, when mathematics became a luxury she couldn't afford. "I clean schools now," she said, returning to her scrubbing. "You have the wrong person." "The Hansong conjecture," one man said. "You proved it using elementary methods when postdocs couldn't crack it with supercomputers." Her hand stilled. That proof had been her goodbye letter to mathematics, posted anonymously because she couldn't bear to sign her name to abandoned dreams. 3 million won, the other man said. "One night of consultation, your student loan debt would disappear." Jiwoo's throat tightened. 3 million won. Her father's medication for 6 months, her brother's school fees, numbers that haunted her more than any equation. "What's the problem?" she asked quietly. They explained: ransomware, encryption, a 72-hour countdown now at 43 hours. Korea's infrastructure held hostage by mathematics weaponized. They needed her to examine the algorithm, to find what others had missed. Jiwoo looked at her reflection in the soapy water, at the woman she'd become. Then she thought of her father's labored breathing, her brother's careful silence about clothes that no longer fit. "I'll need chalk," she said. The Kim Industries tower rose like a glass blade cutting the Seoul skyline. Jiwoo felt microscopic entering the lobby, her janitor's uniform replaced by borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit. Security scanned her 3 times. Executives rushed past without seeing her, their expensive shoes clicking urgency against marble floors. The operations center occupied the entire 47th floor. Banks of servers hummed, and stressed engineers hunched over keyboards, their faces illuminated by screens showing encryption they couldn't break. The air tasted of coffee and desperation. Then she saw him. Min-jun Kim stood at the room's center, a figure of controlled intensity in a charcoal suit. His face was known from magazine covers, but photographs hadn't captured the sharp intelligence in his eyes or the exhaustion beginning to crack his composure. He was younger than she'd expected, and the weight of responsibility sat visibly on his shoulders. "Miss Park," he said, his voice cutting through the chaotic noise. "Thank you for coming." Ji-woo nodded, suddenly aware of everyone watching. These people had doctorates from Seoul National University, MIT, Stanford. She had 2 semesters of incomplete graduate work and calluses from mop handles. "Show me the encryption," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. They led her to a conference room where the algorithm was displayed across multiple screens. Symbols and functions cascaded in complex patterns. The other experts began explaining their attempts, their failures, using terminology meant to intimidate. Ji-woo listened politely, but her mind was already working differently, seeing patterns they'd overlooked because they were looking too hard. "Do you have a blackboard?" she interrupted. The room fell silent. Someone laughed uncertainly. They had quantum computers and AI simulations. "Chalk," Ji-woo repeated, meeting Min-jun's gaze. "I need chalk and a blackboard." Min-jun studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a small crack in his armor. "Get her chalk." They found a wheeled blackboard from a training room, ancient and dusty. Ji-woo stood before it as engineers and cryptographers arranged themselves skeptically behind her. Min-jun watched from the back, arms crossed, expression unreadable. She began writing. Not the complex notation the others had used, but something simpler, more fundamental. Elementary number theory. The basics that most had forgotten in their rush towards sophisticated solutions. The ransomware's encryption relied on a modified RSA algorithm, layered with quantum-resistant padding, unbreakable by conventional means because it required factoring numbers too large for computers to process in the time remaining. But mathematics wasn't just about computation. It was about understanding structure, finding patterns in apparent chaos. Ji-woo's chalk moved faster, filling the board with equations that seemed almost primitive compared to the digital displays surrounding them. She worked silently, lost in a world where only numbers existed, where problems had solutions if you asked the right questions. An hour passed. 2. The experts began whispering, pointing out supposed errors in her approach. One professor from Seoul National University started to interrupt, but Min-jun raised a hand, silencing him without speaking. He'd moved closer, watching Ji-woo with an intensity that made her aware of his presence even while her mind swam in mathematics. "The padding isn't random," she said suddenly, stepping back from the board. "It follows a Fibonacci-like sequence, but modified. See here." She pointed to a pattern in the encryption structure. "They assumed quantum randomness would hide it, but randomness can't truly exist in mathematics. Everything has structure." The room had gone completely quiet. Engineers leaned forward, beginning to see what she saw. "Can you break it?" Min-jun's voice, soft but urgent. Ji-woo turned to him, chalk dust on her borrowed sleeve. "Yes, but not here." Min-jun didn't understand until Ji-woo led them back to Hansong Middle School at 3 in the morning. The building was dark and silent, smelling of floor wax and institutional lunches. She unlocked the janitor's closet, retrieved her supplies, then took them to room 3B, her favorite classroom because it had the largest blackboard, the one she sometimes used during night shifts when mathematics called too loudly to ignore. "This is where you work?" Min-jun asked, surveying the child-sized desks, the alphabet charts, the dinosaur posters peeling at the corners. "This is where I think," Ji-woo corrected, already writing. His security team wanted to protest, but Min-jun waved them to silence. He pulled up a tiny chair, his expensive suit absurd against the bright plastic, and watched as Ji-woo transformed the classroom into her workshop. She covered every available surface with equations, moving between boards with a fluidity that spoke of deep familiarity. This was her element, even in exile from academia. The mathematics flowed through her like music, and Min-jun found himself mesmerized not just by the problem-solving, but by the transformation of the quiet janitor into someone luminous with purpose. "You could have had any position in academia," he said during a brief pause. "Why are you here?" Ji-woo didn't turn from her calculations. "Life isn't always about what we could have. Sometimes it's about what we must do. Your father's medical bills." Min-jun had read her file. "Your brother's education. You sacrificed your career. Sacrifice implies I had a choice." Her chalk scratched against the board. "I made the only decision possible. Mathematics would still be here when I came back. My family wouldn't." Min-jun thought of his own father, who'd built the company, who'd taught him that duty meant placing responsibility above personal desire. He understood sacrifice, but he'd never had to choose between his calling and survival. "After this," he said quietly, "that choice doesn't have to define you." Ji-woo finally looked at him, her eyes revealing depths of fatigue and longing he recognized. "After this, I'm still a janitor, Mr. Kim. 3,000,000 won won't change that." Dawn light filtered through the classroom windows, illuminating chalk dust that hung in the air like possibility. Ji-woo had been working for 7 consecutive hours, sustained by vending machine coffee and the pure momentum of mathematical discovery. Min-jun remained, his earlier composure completely dissolved. He'd shed his jacket, loosened his tie, and asked questions that revealed a sharper technical mind than most expected from a CEO. The encryption was yielding its secrets. Ji-woo's unconventional approach, treating the algorithm not as code to be broken but as a mathematical language to be understood, had revealed vulnerabilities invisible to brute force methods. The creators had been brilliant but arrogant, trusting that complexity would obscure the elegant patterns underlying their weapon. "Here," Ji-woo circled a section of her proof. "The sequence breaks its own rules every 9th iteration. It's meant to look like quantum uncertainty, but it's actually deterministic. Predictable." Min-jun stood beside her at the blackboard, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with exhaustion. His hand traced the equations, following her logic with an understanding that surprised her. He'd studied mathematics at Seoul National University before business school, she remembered from his biography. "This is extraordinary," he said softly. "You're seeing dimensions they never considered?" Ji-woo felt heat rise in her face. Praise from billionaires shouldn't matter, but his words touched something in her that had been dormant for years: professional pride, intellectual recognition. Things she'd thought she'd buried with her abandoned PhD. "We need to implement this as code," Min-jun continued, already pulling out his phone. "My team can translate your mathematics into decryption software, but we're down to 18 hours. "No," Ji-woo said firmly. "Your team will make assumptions, insert optimizations that break the logic. I need to do it myself." Min-jun stared at her. "You write code?" "I paid for my undergraduate degree programming financial models." "Mathematics and code are the same language, Mr. Kim, just different dialects." They returned to Kim Industries, but this time Ji-woo wasn't an uncertain consultant. She was the expert, and the entire operations center rearranged itself around her needs. Min-jun ordered workspace cleared, brought in whiteboards and programming terminals, dismissed anyone who questioned her approach. "Miss Park has authority equivalent to mine on this project," he announced to his staff. "Her decisions are final." Ji-woo felt dozens of eyes on her, some respectful, others resentful. She ignored them all, focusing on the immense task of translating mathematical proof into executable code. The algorithm she'd discovered needed to be implemented with perfect precision. A single error would cascade into failure. She worked in a strange rhythm, switching between chalk and keyboard, muttering calculations under her breath. Min-jun brought her food she barely touched, coffee she drained mechanically. The countdown timer on the wall showed 14 hours remaining. 13, 12. "You need rest," Min-jun said, when her hands began trembling over the keyboard. "I need to finish," Ji-woo replied, refusing to meet his concerned gaze. "Ji-woo." The use of her first name startled them both. He softened his tone. "You're running on fumes. Mistakes happen when you're exhausted. Mistakes happen when you stop trying." She turned to him, seeing her own desperation reflected in his eyes. "I can do this. I just need you to trust me." Min-jun reached out, his hand covering hers on the keyboard, warm and steady. "I do trust you, completely. But I also know that the best mathematicians understand their own limitations." For a moment, Ji-woo allowed herself to feel the weight pressing down. The responsibility, the fear, the years of suppressed longing for the life she'd abandoned. Then she took a breath, nodded, and let Min-jun guide her to a sofa where she intended to rest for 5 minutes. She slept for 40, waking to find Min-jun's jacket draped over her like a blanket, and the countdown at 9 hours. The code was nearly complete. Ji-woo's fingers flew over the keyboard, implementing the final sections of her decryption algorithm. Engineers clustered around her workstation, watching in real time as her program began mapping pathways through the encryption that their supercomputers had declared impossible. Min-jun stood at her shoulder, close enough that she could feel the tension radiating from him. His company, his reputation, thousands of jobs, everything balanced on her work. Yet when she glanced up and caught his reflection in the monitor, what she saw in his expression wasn't just professional concern. "Compilation complete," she announced. "Ready for deployment." The room erupted in controlled chaos. Security protocols were verified, backup systems engaged, every precaution taken before they would unleash her solution against the ransomware. The countdown showed 6 hours and 17 minutes. "If this fails," Min-jun's chief security officer began. "It won't fail," Min-jun interrupted, his eyes never leaving Ji-woo. "Deploy it." Ji-woo initiated the sequence. Her algorithm began its work, probing the encryption, following the mathematical pathways she'd discovered. Progress bars crept across screens. Engineers held their breath. The entire operations center became a single organism focused on those crawling percentage indicators. 5% decrypted. 10. The algorithm was working, peeling back layers of protection with surgical precision. 20%. 30. Ji-woo's heart hammered against her ribs. Then, at 37%, everything stopped. Error messages cascaded across screens. The decryption had hit a wall, a secondary layer of encryption she hadn't anticipated, a trap designed to catch anyone clever enough to break the first barrier. "No," Ji-woo whispered, already scanning the error logs, her mind racing through implications. "They built in a fail-safe. A completely different algorithm activates if someone attempts decryption without the proper key." 5 hours remained. The room descended into panic. Her solution hadn't failed. It had succeeded too well, triggering a defense mechanism that now threatened to corrupt the data permanently. Min-jun's hand found her shoulder. "Can you adapt it?" Ji-woo stared at the screens, at mathematics turning hostile. "I don't know." Ji-woo demanded silence. The operations center cleared except for essential personnel and Min-jun, who refused to leave. She returned to the blackboard, analyzing the error messages, deconstructing the secondary encryption with hands that had stopped trembling. Fear had burned away, leaving only clarity. This new layer was cruder than the first, built for speed rather than elegance. The creators had assumed no one would reach it, so they'd sacrificed sophistication. That arrogance would be their undoing. "It's a substitution cipher," she said, chalk flying across the board. "Wrapped in elliptic curve cryptography to make it look complex. But it's relying on a finite field that's too small." They got lazy. Min-jun watched her work with something approaching awe. She'd transformed again, the exhausted janitor becoming a warrior, wielding mathematics as a weapon. This was who Ji-woo Park truly was, he realized, not the quiet woman scrubbing floors, but this fierce intelligence that could see through deception to underlying truth. "How long to break it?" he asked. 2 hours, maybe 3. Ji-woo glanced at the countdown, 4 hours and 41 minutes. "We'll make it." "Barely." She coded without pause, her previous implementation providing a framework she could modify. Min-jun brought her water, cleared obstacles, kept the anxious executives from interrupting. He'd built an empire through delegation, trusting experts to handle their domains. But watching Ji-woo work, he understood a different kind of leadership, the solitary genius shouldering impossible burdens. "Why did you really leave your PhD program?" he asked during a rare moment when she paused to debug. Ji-woo's hands stilled over the keyboard. "You read my file. You know why. I know the facts. I'm asking about the choice." She turned to face him fully, seeing genuine curiosity rather than professional interest. "My father got sick. Cancer. The experimental treatment wasn't covered by insurance. My brother was in high school, brilliant, deserving better than I could give him on a student stipend. The math would still be there, I thought. Family wouldn't. And now? Now I've learned that some doors once closed don't open again." Min-jun held her gaze. "Some do. If you have someone willing to help you open them." With 53 minutes remaining, Ji-woo deployed the modified algorithm. This time, she'd built in adaptive responses, allowing the code to adjust if it encountered additional surprises. The decryption resumed, pushing past the 37% barrier that had defeated them before. 40%. 50%. The secondary encryption fell away like tissue paper before her refined approach. Min-jun's security team monitored every system, ready to isolate any corruption. The countdown timer cast red light across focused faces. 60%. 70%. Ji-woo allowed herself to hope. "There's something you should know," Min-jun said quietly beside her. "After this is over, assuming we succeed, I'm going to offer you a position. Head of cryptographic research, full budget, your own team." Ji-woo didn't take her eyes from the screens. "I'm a janitor with an incomplete PhD. You're a mathematician who solved what every expert in Korea said was impossible. Credentials are just paper. Capability is what matters." 80%. 90%. The final barriers were crumbling. "I can't abandon my family," Ji-woo said. "My father's treatment, my brother's education." "Your salary would be 800 million won annually," Min-jun interrupted. "Plus benefits that would cover your father's medical care for life and your brother's education through university. You wouldn't be abandoning them, you'd be securing their future." 95%. Ji-woo's breath caught in her throat. "Why?" she asked. "Why invest so much in someone who walked away from mathematics once?" Min-jun moved closer, his voice dropping to something intimate despite the audience of engineers. "Because I recognize what sacrifice looks like. Because brilliance shouldn't be wasted cleaning floors. Because..." He hesitated, then continued. "Because watching you work, I've remembered why I loved mathematics before business consumed me. You've reminded me what passion looks like." 98%. 99%. 100%. Systems began rebooting across the operations center. Banking networks came back online. Healthcare systems reconnected. Data that had been held hostage for 72 hours flowed freely again. Cheers erupted around them, but Ji-woo and Min-jun stood in a bubble of quiet, eyes locked, the mathematics between them transforming into something neither had equations for. The media called it a miracle. Headlines screamed about Kim Industries' recovery, praising their security resilience while speculating about the mysterious expert who'd saved them. Min-jun deflected questions, protecting Ji-woo's privacy as she'd requested. The 3 million won appeared in her account the next morning, along with a contract offer that would change everything. Ji-woo sat in room 3B at Hanseong Middle School. The contract spread across a student desk designed for someone much smaller. Her shift didn't start for 2 hours, but she'd come to think, to this classroom where she'd solved the unsolvable. Head of cryptographic research, 800 million won annually. Her own team, unlimited resources. The chance to return to mathematics not as a forgotten PhD dropout, but as someone who'd proven her worth in the most public way possible. She should sign immediately. This was the door reopening, the second chance that rarely came. Her father could get the treatment he needed, her brother could attend any university he chose, and she could reclaim the life she'd sacrificed. But fear whispered in the margins. What if she failed? What if the ransomware had been luck, a one-time convergence of her specific skills and a specific problem? Academic mathematics was different from corporate research. Could she lead a team when she'd spent years in isolation, when imposter syndrome had convinced her she'd never belonged in that world anyway? I thought I might find you here. Min-jun stood in the doorway, looking impossibly out of place in his expensive suit among the alphabet charts and crayon drawings. He'd respected her request for space, hadn't called or messaged in the 3 days since the crisis ended. Yet here he was, somehow knowing exactly where to look. Deciding whether to sign, he asked, approaching slowly as if she might bolt. Deciding whether I can, Ji-woo admitted. It's been 4 years, Mr. Kim. I'm not the mathematician I was. You're better, he said firmly. You've learned perspective, resilience, humility. The brilliant PhD student who proved the Hansong conjecture had talent. The woman who saved my company has wisdom. What if I disappoint you? Min-jun pulled up a tiny chair, sitting across from her at the student desk, his knees nearly touching his chest. What if you don't? What if you're everything I believe you are and more? They talked as morning light filled the classroom, turning chalk dust golden. Min-jun explained the research division he envisioned, not just corporate security, but fundamental mathematics, pure research alongside practical applications. He wanted to build something unprecedented in Korea, a space where the best minds could explore without artificial constraints. I need someone who understands both the theoretical beauty and practical necessity, he said. Someone who's lived in both worlds. That's you, Ji-woo. She noticed he'd dropped the formality of Miss Park, and she hadn't corrected him. In the 3 days since the crisis, something had shifted between them. The professional boundaries had blurred during those hours of collaboration, when they'd worked in desperate tandem, when his trust in her had been absolute. There's another reason I'm here, Min-jun continued, his voice careful. Beyond the job offer, I wanted to ask... He paused, unusual hesitation from someone known for decisive confidence. Would you have dinner with me? Not as employer and employee, as Min-jun and Ji-woo. Ji-woo's heart performed complicated mathematics in her chest. She'd felt the attraction during their crisis collaboration, the way his presence steadied rather than intimidated her, how his questions revealed a mind that could follow where hers led. But she'd assumed it was circumstantial, the intensity of shared purpose creating false intimacy. I don't date billionaires, she said, deflecting with humor that felt fragile. Good, because I don't date janitors, Min-jun replied with a slight smile. But I would very much like to have dinner with a mathematician who sees patterns I've missed my entire life. Ji-woo studied his face, searching for signs of pity or patronizing interest. She found only genuine regard, the same look he'd given her mathematics, respect earned rather than granted. "I have another shift here tonight," she said. "I gave my notice, but I won't leave them understaffed. I owe them that." "Then let me help you clean," Min-jun said, standing. "I've never mopped a floor, but I'm a quick learner." Ji-woo laughed, the sound surprising her with its lightness. "You want to spend your evening cleaning middle school classrooms?" "I want to spend my evening with you," he said simply. "The location is secondary." Min-jun proved terrible at mopping. His expensive suit jacket hung on a coat hook while he worked in shirt sleeves, pushing the mop with executive determination, but no technique. Ji-woo found herself laughing more than she had in years, watching Seoul's youngest billionaire battle with institutional floor cleaners and lose. "You're doing it wrong," she said, demonstrating proper mopping form. "Let the tool do the work, don't force it." "Metaphor for management," Min-jun observed, watching her efficient movements. "I tend to force things rather than letting them find their natural flow." They worked side by side, cleaning room 3B where Ji-woo had solved the encryption. She showed him how she'd used the space, pointing out sections of blackboard where particular breakthroughs had occurred. He listened with focused attention, asking questions that revealed he'd been thinking deeply about her methodology. "You approached it like art," he said. "Everyone else was treating it like engineering, trying to mechanically break through. You were looking for beauty in the structure." Ji-woo paused in her cleaning. No one had understood that before. Mathematics, to her, had always been aesthetic. Problems were elegant or clumsy, solutions could be beautiful or merely functional. It was why she'd struggled sometimes in graduate school, where efficiency was valued over elegance. "My father used to say that the best equations were like poems," she said quietly. "Dense with meaning, every symbol essential, nothing wasted. I learned mathematics as literature, not just calculation." Min-jun set down his mop, giving her his complete attention. "Teach me. How you see it? I studied mathematics formally, but I never learned to read it as poetry." So in that empty classroom, while twilight deepened outside, Ji-woo showed him. She wrote equations on the blackboard. Not complex proofs, but simple, beautiful relationships. The Fibonacci sequence's appearance in nature. The golden ratio's recurring presence. Prime numbers' mysterious distribution. She explained how each theorem told a story, revealed something fundamental about reality's structure. Min-jun watched her transform, becoming luminous with passion. This was who she was meant to be, not cleaning in shadows, but teaching, discovering, creating. And he realized his feelings went deeper than professional admiration or crisis-born attraction. He was falling for her mind, yes, but also her resilience, her quiet strength, the way she'd chosen family over ambition without bitterness. 3 months later, Ji-woo stood in her new office on Kim Industries' research floor. Glass walls overlooked Seoul, the city spread below like a circuit board of light and possibility. Her team, 7 brilliant mathematicians she'd personally recruited, worked in the open plan space beyond, solving problems that blended theoretical beauty with practical application. The transformation still felt surreal sometimes. She had credentials now, a PhD completion fast-tracked through recognition of her ransomware solution as dissertation-equivalent work. Her father's treatment was progressing well with specialists previously unaffordable. Her brother had been accepted to Seoul National University with a full scholarship she'd helped fund. But the most unexpected change sat across from her at the conference table, reviewing her proposal for a new research initiative. Min-jun visited the research division frequently, ostensibly to monitor progress, though they both knew the real reason. Their dinner date had become weekly, then twice weekly. Then they'd stopped pretending it was periodic rather than constant. "This is ambitious," he said, studying her proposal for a research program combining mathematics and education, bringing theoretical beauty to students who'd never considered it accessible. "It'll be expensive." "It'll be worth it," Ji-woo countered. How many brilliant minds are out there mopping floors because they've never been shown mathematics as anything beyond memorization? We could change that. Min-jun smiled, the expression that had become familiar, that made her heart perform those complicated calculations she still couldn't quite solve. Approved. On one condition. What condition? He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. They'd been cautious about public displays at work, maintaining professionalism despite personal involvement. But in this private moment, he allowed the gesture. Have dinner with me tonight. I want to ask you something important. Ji-woo's pulse accelerated, mathematical precision failing before emotional uncertainty. You're asking now? I'm warning now, Min-jun corrected. So you have time to prepare an answer. Because what I'm going to ask tonight requires the same courage you showed standing at that blackboard, solving the impossible. It requires trusting that some equations have variables we can't predetermine, that some proofs require faith in addition to logic. Ji-woo understood. This brilliant, controlled man who'd built an empire was preparing to make himself vulnerable, to ask a question where the answer wasn't guaranteed. And she realized that the most beautiful mathematics weren't the problems she could solve alone at a blackboard, but the ones that required collaboration, trust, the messy human variables that made calculations unpredictable and wonderful. Yes, she said. I haven't asked yet. I know, Ji-woo smiled. But I already know my answer. To any equation you want to propose, Min-jun, the answer is yes. Outside the glass walls, Seoul glittered with possibility, and inside, two people who'd found each other through mathematics discovered that the most elegant proof was the one they'd write together, variables unknown, outcome uncertain, beauty guaranteed.